Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Rajnikant Pandey from Central University of Jharkhand. Today we are going to talk on module Post-Colonialism from paper Theories and Methods in Social Cultural Anthropology. Post-colonialism is basically a critical theoretical movement which emerged in arts and humanities and has a defining impact on the anthropological mode of understanding of indigenous people, tribal people, or the marginal people. The theory emphasized to interpret and critique the culture of colonialism and imperialism. And this is also a product of resistance to colonization and imperialism. Post-colonial theory seeks to investigate what happens when two cultures clashes and one of them considers itself as superior and assumes a dominance and control over the other. The literary foundation of post-colonial theories have a lasting impact on several disciplines like philosophy, sociology, anthropology, cultural studies, comparative religion, and regional studies, etc. Cultural anthropology, more than any other of the Western academic discipline, has been the target of criticism from post-colonial thinkers. This is because of the overlapping trajectories of colonization and anthropological practices in different parts of the world. The theory questioned the intellectual authority of Europeans to define the native and to represent their culture. Post-colonialism indeed has emerged as a powerful critique to anthropological practices. It has created a space for post-colonial anthropology as well as also a critique of colonial imprints on anthropological works and writings. In this module, we will briefly discuss the emergence of post-colonial thinking and how this emergence of post-colonial thinking have led to the establishment of a separate discipline called post-colonial studies. Further, we can also inquire that this origin of post-colonial ideas has impacted the anthropological thinking as well. We shall also be able to outline the importance of post-colonial theory in ethnographic studies and also in other present contexts. Edward W. Said. Said was born in Jerusalem, Palestine. He attended a British school in Cairo and got higher education at Princeton and Harvard. From 1963 and until his death, he was a professor of English and comparative literature at Columbia University in New York. He emerged as the most prominent name in post-colonial theories and he is considered as pioneer of the field. His book Orientalism, written in 1978, is considered as the founding text and source book for the post-colonial studies. This book directs its attention to the discursive and textual production of colonial meanings and consolidation of colonial power. Orientalism elaborates a unique understanding of imperialism, colonialism as an epistemological and cultural attitude which accompanies the curious habit of dominating and wherever possible ruling the distant territories. Orientalism is defined by Said as the project of teaching, writing, and researching the Orient. The Orient was represented as mystical, irrational, and sensuous with ironically ambivalent fascination and disgust by Europeans. Said questions the self-imposed authoritative position taken by Westerners, citing Marx's remark when Marx remarked like they cannot represent themselves so they need to be represented. Said problematized the binaries created by West to essentialize and reify the way of life of people in the East. As Said puts it, Orientalism was ultimately a political vision of reality, whose structure promoted the difference between the familiar and the strange. Familiar in this case is the European West, and the strange in this case is the Orient, the people in the East, and them. Thus, what we see that the Said's critique was not directly engaging with the system of colonial power and practices, but also with the system of colonial knowledge and the creation of Orient as unified cultural area and category of representation. He bluntly rejects the Western representation and its epistemological claims. Said's critique was basically founded upon his studies of own native area from where he comes, like West Asia and North Africa. and his own active interest in the Palestinian problems and issues. His later work, like The Question of Palestine, Covering Islam, and Culture and Imperialism, they all focuses upon the Zionist imperialism as well as the United States Islamophobia. In his very important Culture and Imperialism, written in 1993, he examines the complex and ongoing relationship between East and West, colonizer and colonized, white and black, metropolitan and colonial. Here, he is less confrontational. What we see, there is a shift. Here, he is less confrontational in his approach and later accepts the ambivalency of Western discourses. So, all in all, Said is very important thinker for anthropologists because his insights are important for the ethnographic fieldwork. We generally conduct fieldwork in situations of others' culture. So, Said's ideas of divide between us and them, self and other is very important for the building anthropological fieldwork and the methods. Let's begin with the definition aspect of post-colonialism. The post-colonial can simply mean after colonial. However, what should be called post-colonial is highly disputed. The colonialism simply refers to the physical occupation of one land by people associated with another place. This involves settlement of colonies, agriculture, industry, etc. The term imperialism, however, is used to refer the removal of resources and wealth by any area without actual settlement. It means colonialism is geographical in its connotation and imperialism is economic in its connotation. Scholars have argued that there could be two ways of writing post-colonialism, differentiated by the use of hyphen. Post-colonialism with a hyphen refers to a temporal aftermath, that is a period of time after colonization. And post-colonialism without hyphen refers to a critical aftermath, that is a critique of colonialism that lie beyond but remain closely influenced by colonization. The critical aftermath, which directs its attention towards understanding of contestation of colonial domination and legacies of colonialism, is most important goal of post-colonial thinking. If we talk about the beginning of post-colonialism, basically we can trace its beginning in the movements against colonial empires. We know that in everywhere colonies, people started to protest against the colonial brutality. The leaders who were the fountainhead against these colonizers shaped the discourse of anti-empire sentiment and language of resistance. The Algerian national Frantz Fanon was most important among them, and he is widely regarded as the pioneer of post-colonial thinking in the West. Fanon was born in a French colony in Caribbean called Martinique. He was trained in psychiatry and medicine in France at the University of Lyon. He chose to pursue his career as psychiatrist in Algeria, which was another French colony in Africa. There he started participating in Algerian War of Independence, which led to the formation of a party called Front de Liberation Nationale. Later on, he resigned from his medical position and started working with these groups. He started writing for the FLN and editing the journal called Al Mujahideen. Fanon himself was experienced the colonial might and resisted it throughout his life. He applied his training in psychopathology for the analysis of colonialism. He was influenced with the dialectic materialism of Marx and Hegel, and he used it for the understanding of colonial dominance of local people. He wrote a very interesting book called Black Skin, White Mask in 1952 in French language, which was an exploration of the experiences of black people in French colonies. Living in Caribbean and in France, he have experienced the problems of black people's encounter with the white people. He himself examined the role of racial features in shaping of life of people in colonies. He has personally experienced the exploitation and suffering of black race that live with a sense of inferiority in colonies. He discusses the attempt of black native elites to internalize the colonial norms and values and failure to change the skin color. The native surrenders to the will of white masters, and only way to emancipate them were to hide behind the white mask, as their skin can never be white. The black elites have to wear white masks to get recognition from the outside or sometimes even from themselves as peer or social groups. His work brings in the dialectical and psychological dimension of making up black people as Negro and others and its traumatizing effect on the human psychology. He proposes for the unmasking of black men and women from the white ideology and constructing their own identity, which is free from the white norms and values, as the primary way of emancipation of black in colonies. His other important works like Dying Colonialism and Wretched of the Earth are all call for decolonization, and these are situated within his moral commitments to bring equal rights and recognition to every human being. In the book Dying Colonialism, he describes the Algerian revolutionary movements and tactics deployed by Algerians against the colonizers. In Wretched of the Earth, he recommends that the revolutionary path is necessary for the decolonization. He believes in the participation of local masses in black revolution against these colonizers. He wanted to use the violence to free themselves from these colonizers. His agenda of violence is about throwing it back to the colonizers who have used violence for the colonizing of the local people. Writings of Fanon anticipate several of ideas which are central to post-colonial thinking today. Several other scholars in academics like M.A. Cassere, Albert Memmi, and others were reflecting upon the colonizers and colonized to understand the post-colonial reality in academics as well as at the ground level. Mahatma Gandhi, who was negotiating freedom from colonial regime in Indian subcontinent, wrote a very interesting piece, Hind Swaraj, in 1909. This can also be taken as one of the earliest critique of colonial power. It is very important declaration of self-rule and rejection of Western-centric notion of civilization. It emphasizes the virtue of Indian tradition and rejects the superiority of Western lifestyles. His ideas have guided the making of Indian nation and nationalism in various ways. Though, sadly, there is a lack on part of social thinkers in India to build upon the legacy of Gandhi for conceptualizing social thoughts, and instead what we see that we are borrowing from Marx, Durkheim and Weber from the industrial West who never fits to the Indian society. Recently, the historians like Partha Chatterjee and Ranjit Guha, who belongs to the Subaltern Studies group, have taken the importance of Gandhi and they have utilized his thinking for understanding of post-colonial India. The important thinking in post-colonialism is grounded in the work of three scholars, namely Edward Said, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and Homi K. Bhabha. They represent the so-called Holy Trinity of post-colonialism, and they are the most important thinkers about whom we are going to discuss in this particular module. Anthropologists were apprehensive of adopting the post-colonial thinking because it puts all classical anthropological enterprise into question. The post-colonial critique, which was largely coming from outside, targeted the ethnographic practice and power relations it builds over its subjects and object of study. Many of the post-colonialists like Said have specifically questioned the anthropological role in creation of other. However, there was increased consciousness inside discipline about the power relations which have always existed between observers and observed. Anthropology as a discipline has always been sympathetic to the people they study and has advocated the preservation of their culture and tradition from Western influences. However, in process, we have also distorted the local realities, exotified local cultures, and single-handedly wrote the people's history and their fate. Anthropology has anticipated many of the concerns raised by post-colonial critics. Saudi-born anthropologist Talal Asad edited a book, Anthropology and its Colonial Encounter, in 1973. He highlighted the interesting parallels between colonization and anthropology and its consequences for colonized people. All the contributors in this volume were skeptical of colonial biases in anthropological writings of past. This was the part of reflexive turn which was emerging in discipline, and this work has been instrumental in raising the awareness of colonial imprints on ethnographic fieldwork as well as on writings. Dutch anthropologist Johannes Fabian, in his very important work Time and Other, written in 1983, blended his critical argument with anthropological attempts of freezing the community in a particular time when ethnographic fieldwork are being conducted. Not only the notion of bounded holistic community, but also fixing the people in a particular ethnographic present is a problematic. Jack Goody, in her East in the West, reassesses the Eurocentric biases present in the writings of East in the Western academicians. She challenges the exaggeration of traditional family and labor relations as hindrance to the East societies. She questions the Western rationality which seeks to modernize the West but not the East. This leads to the misconception about East and misunderstanding of the West. No doubt, over the years, anthropological writings and methods have started to surface from educated native community members and from different other corners. For example, Wayne Deloria, who is an expert of Native American studies and he himself is a Lakota Sioux tribe, wrote Custer died for your sins as early as in 1970s. He furiously rejected the relativism of French Boas, which led to the eternal exoticism of Native Americans. He was highly critical of those who tried to speak about and on behalf of the native in the process of stopping them to speak for themselves. Another example is Linda Tuhai Smith. She is a Maori indigenous scholar from New Zealand who has written Decolonizing Methodology in 1919. She talks of the social sciences and its claim to research and write about the third world indigenous people. She believed that research is one of the dirtiest words in the vocabulary of indigenous people. Smith, in her book, remarks that the ways in which scientific research is implicated in the worst excesses of colonialism remains a powerful remembered history for many of the world's colonized people. She highlights the imperialist ideology implicit in the Western knowledge creation, and decolonizing research can help to reclaim the indigeneity and indigenous way of knowing and being. The impact of the post colonial critics like Edward Said was so deep that it motivated some anthropologists like James Carrier to edit and present a counter narrative to the Orientalism. He titled his book Occidentalism, written in 1995, in which he proposed that Oriental people also have a biased and stereotypical view of West. The contribution to this volume outlined the need of highly reflexive writing to erase these mutual stereotypical representation. In a further writing called Threatening Anthropology, written in 2004 by David Price, shows that how anthropology has been used as a cover for spying and military work, and it has added an imperialistic powers till date. The use of anthropologists during Iraq War has also been confronted by Marshall Sahlins. Sahlins is one of the prominent American anthropologists, and he, in his writing, and many of the other anthropologists have questioned the use of anthropology in war situation. Many of the continuing impacts of colonial power structure is inherent in the Western system of knowledge creation, which needs to the dismantle for future abuse of colonized nations. The post-colonial thinking provides a window for these endeavors. Many of the anthropologists still believe in the power of empirical scientific research of simple communities and its role in understanding and interpreting the lived reality cross-culturally. For example, Ernst Gellner have raised voices against post-colonial thinking for undermining the scientific truth claims, confusing ideology and analysis, and not understanding that problem of power and culture is too important to be left to literary criticism. Indigenous studies as a discipline has recently emerged in many of the universities across the world, and which talks about the non-colonized lands and the post-colonial discipline to represent the writing about native people. The emergence of indigenous movement across the world has guided the development of indigenous studies as a multidisciplinary subject. The Maori studies in New Zealand, Native studies in Canada, Aboriginal studies in Australia, and Indigenous studies in USA is example of such efforts to correct the Eurocentric biases in research and writing about these people. These studies have emphasized the use of native tongue and development of indigenous language for the research as well as teaching. Let's talk about Homi K. Bhabha. Homi K. Bhabha is a cultural critic and one of the leading post-colonial theorists of the present time. He is currently professor of English at Harvard University, and he was, though born in Mumbai, India, he took his most of the education abroad. He was given Padma Bhushan by Indian government for his contribution in the field of literature. He developed the theoretical insight of post-colonialism and coined several neologisms like mimicry, hybridity, ambivalence, and influence, etc., which are the important words in the post-colonial thinking. He was inspired by Lacanian psychoanalysis, post-structuralism, and postmodernism in his critique of various constructions of cultural identity in colonies. In post-colonial studies, the question of rendering native marginalized without any agency of their own and identity of their own are and the misrepresentation of native culture and the distortion of native subjects has been crucial. Bhabha in his essay of Mimicry and Man deals with the issue with the concept of mimicry. Mimicry is the process of imitation by local people to the lifestyle of outsiders. The colonizers taught and disciplined the native people to learn and ape the white man culture and become civilized like them, but not quite. He asserts the colonizers also wish to maintain certain differences so that they can rule them forever. This shows the ambivalence of colonizers in their desire to reform the subjects but not a total transformation like Englishmen. It means they can learn some of the tricks of the colonizers but they can never become fully like them. This dilemma results into what Bhabha calls mimicry. He believes that mimicry has subversive power because disclosing the ambivalence of colonial discourses also disrupts its authority. Though the native who mimic the colonizer's culture never realize the power of becoming reformed, recognizable, and other, and its potential to undermine the powerful system of colonizers. Bhabha believes that mimicry can lead to mockery and subversion of colonizers by colonized. In his most important work, The Location of Culture, Bhabha deals with negotiation of cultural identity across race, gender, cultural tradition in any colonial situation. He is against all claims of purity of racial and national identity and instead believes in between categories and hybridity. He maintains that identity is produced in a third space, which is in between real and idealized space. This third space is the precondition for the articulation of cultural differences. The colonizers and colonized can also not be viewed as separate entities defining themselves independently without recognizing each other historically. Instead, he suggests the ongoing negotiation of cultural identity involves the exchange of cultural performance and production of hybridity. He believes in understanding of cultural differences, which is situated not only in the analysis of colonial past but also in post-colonial present. Hybridity emphasizes the interdependence of colonizers and colonized and its continuous interaction after decolonization. In his other very important work, Nation and Narration, Bhabha limits the nationalism to a mere narrative. He critiques the essentialist reading of third world national identity, supposedly as innate, traditional, and homogeneous, which renders people inferior to the Western nations. The idea of nation is construction emerging from contesting hybridity and cultural constituencies. Bhabha, being a diasporic scholar, seeks to find the location of culture in marginal spaces, and he shares the vision of post-colonial misrepresentation. These ideas have lasting impact on understanding the cultural differences in present world. Anthropologists can take this critical agenda further for understanding the identity of indigenous people in so-called nation state. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak is a radical post-colonial literary critic. She herself is a third world woman of color, Bengali exile from India, and at the same time diasporic elite intellectual currently teaching at prestigious Columbia University. Her critiques of post-colonial realities are uneasy marriage of feminism, Marxism, and deconstructionism. She received Padma Bhushan from Government of India for her contribution to the literary criticism and feminist literature. The exemplar of her theory, the essay Can the Subaltern Speak, is a masterful work first published in Marxism and the Interpretation of Culture in 1988. In her essay, Spivak casts doubt on the categories like third world and post-colonial and label them as unstable essentialist categories. These categories are product of violent encounter between colonial powers and natives. She terms this process of creation and continuation of knowledge of others as an epistemic violence of colonization. She raises her concern with the post-colonial approaches that study the subaltern and claim to provide the academic voices for them. She believes that these post-colonial critics instead reinforce and co-opt the neo-colonial imperative of subjugation, exploitation, discrimination, and cultural erasure. She questions the location of post-colonial writers in privileged Western academic institutions and its influence in recycling of colonial system of knowledge and power. She finds serious faults with such kind of post-colonial efforts to ameliorate the subaltern from oppression and marginalization. She, for example, is apprehensive of subaltern historiography which developed in leadership of Ranjit Guha to write alternative post-colonial history of marginalization in India. It will be very interesting to know that she also translated the writings of Mahaseta Devi, a Bengali writer of Adivasi literature, to present them as a parameter of post-colonial thinking emerging from the native root. Subaltern Studies Collective. Subaltern Studies Collective came into being in 1980s with a purpose of attempting alternate historiography of India. The group, under the leadership of historian Ranjit Guha and other founding members, directed their attention to free the Indian history from the cycles of colonial, Eurocentric, elitist model of historiography. They aimed at making peasants, tribals, and other marginalized groups as the main subject of historical research and writing. This Subaltern Studies Collective over the years has created a set of scholarship with diverse interests and appeal, but notion of marginality and subalternity remained central to the ideas and writing of these scholars. There are 8-9 scholars who belongs to different set of universities have come together to form this school as a major theme in Indian historiography. The theoretical movement has inspired the Latin American studies and African studies has achieved a global recognition. The Subaltern Studies Group has immensely contributed to the understanding of history of marginalized groups and has helped in correcting the wrongs of colonial form of history writing. The project have moved towards post-colonial understanding of nationalism and identity issues in Indian context, particularly in the work of Partha Chatterjee. This school has several convergences with post-colonial thinking in literature. The school has immense potential to contribute to the anthropological fieldwork in post-colonial South Asia, countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, etc. Then, with this, we can conclude the theories which have emerged in the post-colonialism as subject as well as in different other disciplines. We talked about many of the theorists who were the founders or pioneers of the thinking and we move to its implication for anthropology. Basically, if we summarize the whole thinking of postcolonialism, what we understand that it is a critical theoretical movement which emerged in arts and humanities and has a defining impact on the anthropological mode of understanding of tribal and indigenous people. The theory emphasized to interpret and critique the culture of colonialism and imperialism and its product of resistance to colonialism and imperialism. The post-colonialism can trace its beginning in the movements against colonial empires. The leaders who were at the fountainhead against these movements shaped the discourse of anti-empire sentiment and language of resistance. We talked about Frantz Fanon, Mahatma Gandhi, Meme, and many other thinkers who started these kind of thinkings. Later on, we talked about Edward Said's Orientalism. We also talked about its impact on the defining the others. This book, which is very important book in the post-colonial thinking, can guide many of the anthropological research. Homi K. Bhabha is also a cultural critic and one of the leading post-colonial theorists who reflected upon the idea of mimicry and hybridity in the post-colonial situation. And he talked about the misrepresentation of native, which is an ongoing process, and how it has distorted the native culture. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak is a radical post-colonial thinker, and she in her essay Can the Subaltern Speak theorizes the epistemic violence of colonization. She basically talk about that how the research and writing is creating a violence of knowledge. So we as anthropologists can borrow many of these ideas, but at the same time what we saw that anthropologists themselves have anticipated many of the concerns raised by the post-colonial critics. For example, we talked about Saudi-born anthropologist Talal Asad and his book Anthropology in its Colonial Encounter, which is a very much interesting and parallel development along with the post-colonial theory. Further, what we saw that some of the native scholars like Vince Deloria and Linda Tuhami Smith, they are coming forward with their ideas and they are representing the community and they are challenging the notion and the writings created by the West about these local people. So the emergence of these kind of sustained movement and as well as coming scholarship have shaped the post-colonial theory in much nuanced way. This is the right time when the anthropologists should take over the post-colonial theory as important tool to guide research and writing and as well as the ethnographic text. Thank you.